Today we are going to talk about 6 calisthenics myths and whether they are actually true or not. Now, just in case you've clicked on this video and you've never heard of calisthenics before, essentially calisthenics is a form of training that relies mainly on your body weight as the form of resistance. And this can range from doing the fundamental basic movements, things like push-ups and pull-ups, to street workouts, swinging around on bars, and really freestyling the style of training. So if you ever hear the sort of long and rather confusing word calisthenics, you can just think of a broad range of exercises which rely mainly on your body weight as the form of resistance. Now, my personal experience with my training background and with what I do now is that I specifically focus a lot on calisthenics, but I do not have any type of background in calisthenics. I didn't start doing any type of calisthenics training until I was about 27 or 28, and that was coming from never having been in the gym, never having been into exercise, fitness or sports, and definitely coming from a really low base of strength. I couldn't hold my body weight against the wall and I couldn't do a bodyweight squat, for example. And now it's a part of my job. So that's a little bit about me, but I've got loads of videos on my background and why I'm passionate about calisthenics. And what I really want to get stuck into is these 6 reasons or these 6 myths around calisthenics and whether they're true or not. So let's discuss. There's 2 really big ones that I see thrown around a lot, and I want to address those ones first. The first is that you can't do calisthenics if you're overweight. Now, obviously, when we think of calisthenics and we think about the fact that we're using our body as a form of resistance, the heavier you are or the more weight you have to move, the harder the exercises are going to be. However, that in no way means that calisthenics is not accessible if you have excess weight. I personally had lost the majority of my weight before I started calisthenics, and that wasn't on purpose. That was just because I didn't even know it was a style of training that exists. I'd say I probably weighed around 10 or 15 kilos more than I weigh currently. To be honest with you, it didn't even cross my mind when I started calisthenics training that my weight might be affecting it. I just was in this naive little bubble and just trying different things. But I know it's definitely something that a lot of people think about. So I want you to rest assured that even if you have excess weight or you weigh a little bit more than maybe you normally would, that it is absolutely not an issue to start calisthenics. In fact, it might actually be beneficial if you're looking at getting into calisthenics as a style of training, then this could be a perfect time to start calisthenics. The reason for that is that if you intend to build muscle, build strength, continue with your calisthenics training, but simultaneously lose weight, aka lose body fat, you start training at your current body weight and build strength off that, and then continue to drop that weight. Strength to weight ratio is only going to increase, which is really beneficial if we're doing calisthenics. Now, regardless of whether your goal is to lose body fat or if you're happy with the weight you are, if you do have excess weight or you're overweight and you want to do calisthenics, it is still a great form of training, because the beauty of calisthenics is that it can be adapted so easily for different fitness levels and different body types. So you can regress or progress exercises, do modifications, and make it work for you, your body, and your level. Any form of exercise, if you're just starting out trying something new, you have to be mindful of meeting yourself where you're at, so starting yourself at your level and building up from there, having a little bit of fun, being open-minded. You can always potentially get a trainer or follow a program if you want to, but that is the same for any training style. So absolutely, calisthenics is available to you if you are overweight. In fact, it's a fantastic form of training. I know I'm a little bit biased, but I'm going to say that quite a lot. It is a fantastic form of training to build muscle, to build proprioception, to build balance, and these things are always going to benefit anybody regardless of what their situation. It might also be worth remembering that patience is also required in abundance with calisthenics, because progress can be quite slow. So regardless of whether you have excess weight or you have a training background in a different form of training, patience, determination, and just chipping away and looking at that long term is going to be important when you're doing calisthenics. All right, myth number 2 is that calisthenics is not suitable for beginners. I feel like my journey can prove that that is not necessarily the case. However, we're going to go into a little bit more detail as to why this is absolutely not true. As we mentioned in the last point, calisthenics is great because it's a style of training that can be adapted for all different fitness levels and body types. So regardless of where you are, whether you're a beginner, whether you've been training in the past, whether you've been doing calisthenics for several years, bodyweight training is going to be accessible for you. One great thing is that you can do it anywhere. So if the idea of going to the gym is a little bit daunting, which is totally normal, you can do it in the comfort of your own home, which is where I train a lot and definitely where I started out. I just did it in my living room, just in a little corner. Especially at the beginning, you don't need any equipment because your body weight is going to be a sufficient amount of resistance, and so it makes it really accessible. What bodyweight training and calisthenics is really good at is building foundational strength. And if you work on the foundational exercises in calisthenics, things like push-ups, pull-ups, dips, squats, lower body variations, core exercises and hip hinges, will give you a great basis for any type of training that you're going to do in the future, but also just your general health, strength and fitness. Additionally, because naturally when you're using your body weight, you have to incorporate things like your mobility and your flexibility work, it's really great for your overall fitness, your cardiovascular health, your strength, your flexibility, your proprioception, your functionality, all of which are really important aspects of day-to-day general health. If you're in a position where you've never done any exercise before, you have done something and you want to get into calisthenics, but you've never really sort of dipped your toe in the water with that, then don't be afraid to get stuck in. Start working on those fundamental exercises, and I have some videos on those if you want to go and check them out. And simply all you need to do is adapt the movements to your fitness level. For example, if you can't do a push-up on your toes, which again is totally normal, like I say, I couldn't even do one against the wall when I started out. So if you can't do one on your toes, you just simply put your hands on an inclined surface, and the higher the incline, the easier that exercise is going to be, and you build your strength and slowly drop that incline until you can do a full push-up. Make that sound like it's a very quick and easy thing to do, but it definitely took me over a year to be able to do one decent push-up from where I was on the wall, so don't be alarmed if it does take a while. That's an example of how you can modify exercises, and let me tell you, there are literally thousands of ways to modify exercises, so there will always be something that's right for you. So number 3 is something that I feel like people inherently believe about calisthenics, and I totally get where it comes from, but it's not true, and that is that calisthenics is really only for men and not suitable for women. Now, I think the reason why people feel this way is because it is a very male-dominated style of training. If you go online and you search calisthenics, you're usually going to see mostly men doing it, but there is women who do it, I promise, and they are really, really good at it. So on that note, calisthenics is just as much for women as it is for men. I actually want to add in here, in calisthenics, everyone wants to see everyone else succeed, no matter what level you're at. Always another level to reach in calisthenics, so everybody knows the struggle, the patience required, and the work that you need to put in to be able to get there. It's always a really supportive community. If you ever feel daunted by the idea that there is a lot of men doing it, I just want to put it out there that they always are really, really supportive. Now, you may or may not know that calisthenics is quite upper body dominant. So a lot of the exercises are going to focus on using muscles in your upper body. For a lot of women, naturally, we tend to have a little bit of a stronger body, whereas men seem to have quite a lot of natural upper body strength. So when we look at training in calisthenics, it can seem a little bit easier. I'm going to put that in brackets. Maybe the barrier to entry is a little bit lower for males, but I promise you, if you can stick with it and stay dedicated and really persevere, the payoff is so worth it. As I mentioned, as a form of training, obviously it really helps building strength, overall flexibility, cardiovascular health, and generally being able to move better and be functional. So it's a great form of training in that regard. And of course, we've talked about having so many different modifications and regressions that you can use so you can make it work for your level and build up through that. One of the really great things I love about calisthenics is that there is just so many different things that you can work on, and as I mentioned, it kind of takes different forms as well. You've got your strict form fundamentals, and then you've got a bit more of your freestyle and street workout styles on the other end of the spectrum, and you can kind of float between them all, which is what I do. And so you can really have fun with your training, try different things, and sometimes you might be surprised at what your body is capable of. Okay, so number 4 is that calisthenics is easy. Now, I feel like anyone who does calisthenics is to blame for this myth, because it does look easy. When you watch someone do calisthenics who's really good at it, it looks incredibly easy, effortless probably. Now, the word calisthenics is actually derived from the Greek kalos and thenos, which means beautiful strength. And when you watch people do calisthenics, like I say, who are really good at it, they do make it look like gravity doesn't exist, and that it is beautiful, that the way they move their bodies is almost like artwork. And you can look at it and think, that's super easy, I can do that. And I do this all the time, it's one of my toxic traits. And then I try and do something that looks incredibly simple or is a basic move in calisthenics, and I find it extremely hard. That's because it really is not as easy as it looks. Calisthenics requires a lot of skill, a lot of strength, and being able to control your body through different planes of motions. And that's something that sometimes you don't get with other forms of training. It also can test you in different ways. For example, if we look at pull-ups, that requires a lot of body control and strength mainly to be able to do that with good form. Whereas if we look at a handstand, that also takes a lot of proprioception, balance and coordination, as well as strength and mobility as well. Another thing that I feel like makes calisthenics just that little bit harder is that it can take an incredibly long time to learn new skills. I mean, some skills can take years to learn if we're looking at things like planches and front levers, mana, even handstands. So that definitely adds another layer of difficulty to calisthenics. So overall, while calisthenics can look beautiful and incredibly easy when you're just watching it as an observer, it takes an incredible amount of strength, patience, dedication, and hard work to be able to do it as a form of training, which on one hand makes it incredibly rewarding and fun to work towards, but also makes it a very, very challenging form of training as well. I feel like that made it sound very scary and off-putting, so I don't want you to think that it's just hard and it shouldn't be worthwhile, because there's so many little wins that you can find along the way. Even if you just move your body an inch a little bit higher in a certain exercise, or it just moves a little bit easier, you just feel a little bit stronger in your day-to-day life, you can see how it's paying off, and those little things are so amazing. And I promise you, there is no feeling like when you master a skill for the first time. It's incredible. So while we're kind of talking about it, myth number 5 is that calisthenics is not as effective as just lifting weight. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say one form of training is better than the other, because that's definitely not true. Everyone has preferences, and I personally believe that every form of training has different benefits that it can offer. So for me, although I love calisthenics, it's my passion and it's something that I do a lot, I do lots of different styles of training, and I like to be able to challenge my body in a lot of different ways. I think that's really, really beneficial for overall health and fitness. But that being said, I am just a little bit biased towards it. So there's a couple of reasons why calisthenics is not necessarily better than weightlifting, but is just as effective, or might be better in certain circumstances than weightlifting. The first one we kind of mentioned already, which is that you can do it anywhere, because the resistance that you're mainly going to use is your body. So whether you're at a park, you're on holiday, you're in your hotel room, or you're in a gym, you have access to your gym, which is you. So you can basically look around you in your environment and you can create a workout. I could look around me in this fairly empty room and make an easy workout. I could do incline push-ups on the bed. I could do Bulgarian split squats and step-ups. I'd be able to do dips with my arms on the bed as well. I'd be able to do a handstand against the wall. So there's so many different options, and that's just in one tiny space. Whereas if you're doing weightlifting, you do rely on having equipment, whether that's at home or whether that's at the gym. Next up, calisthenics can really help build functional strength. And I'm not saying that lifting weights doesn't necessarily do this, but how you then see that in your day-to-day life is very apparent when you do calisthenics. Like I say, you're working on not just building strength, but the proprioception, the coordination, the functional movements. So you might notice, and I see this a lot with my clients, they will say that they notice walking up the stairs is a lot easier, or the natural movements that we do throughout the day, such as squatting down, picking things up, pulling, pushing, all of these things you can notice benefits from doing calisthenics. And again, this is not to say that you won't see those with weightlifting, but there's definitely been periods of time where I have had to just do calisthenics for a while, whether I've been traveling or the gym's been shut, so I haven't had access to external weights, and I've solely done calisthenics. And when I've come back to lifting in the gym, I've been able to lift heavier. And not just that, more importantly, I feel more solid. I feel like my joints are more stable. I feel like the movements are better, and that you can really, really notice. Another one that we kind of already touched on is the fact that you always naturally, when you do calisthenics, are working on your mobility and your flexibility. And not only is this great for overall health and day-to-day life, but it's also really great at minimizing the risk of injury in the future as well. So that's one huge benefit that you get. And lifting a weight from A to B doesn't always give you that challenge. Not to touch on the difficulty of calisthenics again, but again, calisthenics can be very challenging. Now, lifting weights can of course be insanely challenging depending on what you're doing, but learning new skills in calisthenics just have a different level of challenge. And again, because you're using so many body systems, it really sets it apart. Some of the more advanced calisthenics exercises, such as muscle ups, press handstands, planches, back levers, front levers, take a long time and a lot of strength and skill and coordination to learn, and that makes them incredibly challenging in comparison to other forms of training, but also incredibly rewarding too. I think the last one I'm going to add in here, because I'm a big proponent of just enjoying movement and moving in a way that just feels right for you, not having too many rules and regulations. And ideas in your head about what exercise should be, because I feel like we build it up to be something that it really isn't or doesn't have to be, is that calisthenics is fun. Moving your body in a way that you've not tried before, maybe you're around a bunch of friends, is a fun form of training. I know when I started out, I couldn't do anything. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what exercises I should be learning. And I just started hanging on a bar or trying to lift my legs up, or I would go in my room and I'd try and do handstands against the wall. And it was just so much fun. And I would go and while away hours listening to good music and just playing around with what I could do. I might see something online and try it and fail miserably, but I would try again. And I still have these little sessions where I'll just go and I have no preconceived idea of what I'm going to do. I'll just go and have a little bit of play. And it's funny because the next day you're like, oh my gosh, my muscles hurt so bad, because you're using all these little muscles that you just don't naturally use. So calisthenics can be so much fun as well. Again, I'm a little bit biased, but I definitely see so many women and men having so much fun with it as a form of training, and sometimes that is just as important as what you're actually achieving. And last up, number 6, is that calisthenics is not safe. I kind of understand where this myth comes from, because you look at people who do gymnastics or calisthenics and there seems to be a decent amount of injury, but you see that in any type of training. If you're moving your body more regularly and you're training hard or pushing yourself, there's always going to be a risk for injury, and it's just about managing that risk to the best of your ability. So there's definitely a few things that you can do. Obviously, firstly, and I feel like I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite with this one, because it's important to know your level and sort of meet yourself where you're at. However, I'm also an advocate for just trying things that you can't do, but you do need to know your limits. Like, don't try and do a spin around a bar on a really high bar in an uncontrolled environment. Maybe go and find something that's a little bit safer to do so. I would know from experience. But like I say, knowing where your body is at and where you can push yourself to is something that I would say is important for any form of training, as well as using the correct progressions and really focusing on quality over quantity, but also having fun with your training, because that's important. Of course, as with any exercise, warm up properly, make sure you're looking after your joints, work on your mobility a little bit. Again, I'm a hypocrite because I'm really bad at doing flexibility and mobility work, like chronically bad. So working on your mobility and flexibility and trying to really nail those fundamentals. The nature of bodyweight training, because we're putting a lot of pressure through our joints, means it can be quite stressful. So it is important to look after that. So make sure you're doing your wrist mobility exercises, make sure you're warming up properly, grab yourself a band, and just really listen to your body. Don't train through any niggles or injury. Let them seem to, or modify your exercises accordingly. To come back to the original myth, I would say that we have debunked the fact that calisthenics is not safe. It's a very controlled and slow, progressive form of training. And as we talked about, you can make it work for any level. You can do it in the comfort of your home, or you can do it in a gym. And you're not actually going to be throwing around much external weight, initially really using any equipment. So there's definitely that to consider that's taken out of the equation. So it can be a perfectly safe form of training. And as with anything, if you don't feel that you're quite confident with it, or you're not quite sure what you're doing, or you just feel a little bit on edge, there's always the option to go and seek professional advice. You could get a personal trainer, you could get a program that's designed for you, you could read some books on it and try to teach yourself. There are so many different options, but never feel afraid to reach out to someone, even if it's just going to a workshop. Sometimes these things are so beneficial, but also you don't need to do these things either. So it's just about being intuitive and finding what works for you. And that is it. I could definitely think of a few more myths that were around calisthenics, but I thought these were the main ones that I hear come up again and again and again. If you do have any more, feel free to drop them down below and we can have a little discussion. I hope it's taken a little bit of fear out of calisthenics, and if you're sitting there thinking that you'd like to try it, that you might be interested, but you're just not quite sure where to start, I would 100% recommend just getting stuck in, having a little bit of fun, moving your body, seeing what you're capable of, and just seeing if it's right for you. You don't have to do it as your sole form of training. As I mentioned, it's good to do lots of different things, challenge your body in lots of different ways, and try to see exercise and movement more as just something that's intuitive and something that you can have fun with and that adds to your life, rather than something that you have to schedule into your life and do on a daily basis, because that's not what it is, and life's too short for that anyway. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!